So sit back, relax, enjoy this episode, and welcome to 786 Boulevard. Ali, Hasnain, Assalamu alaikum, and thanks so much for coming back for episode 4 of 786 Boulevard. Ali, you have returned to us after a hiatus. People are asking questions. My email inbox is full. People are freaking out. It's trending on Twitter because end of episode 2, you said you were sick and you might have coronavirus, and then you just disappeared. Episode 3, you were nowhere to be seen. So can you please clarify for the audience, clarify for your fans, what's happening? Where were you? What's this journey? What's this journey you've been on in this past 2 weeks? What's been happening?
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me again. So I was feeling a little feverish. I was feeling, I guess, tired, coughing a little bit, and those were some of the symptoms, especially if you go on WebMD. you, you think you have every disease in the world. But anyway, I actually went down to DC to visit my father for Father's Day. So
nice.
That's why I took a week off from here. But I'm back in health. Oh, you okay there?
Yeah, for people who are just tuning in. For people who are just tuning in, basically, so this is our second time recording this episode because so many things have been going wrong. Mics have been failing, lighting has been all over the place, and this lamp is on its last legs. But hopefully next time we'll be set up more professionally, inshallah. So I asked you this question when we recorded the first time. I'm going to ask you guys again because obviously people haven't heard. But here's a hypothetical. You are stranded on a desert island. Your plane has crashed into the ocean, but luckily you survived and you are alone on this desert island. You've got all your supplies, you've got food, you've got everything you need. Even there was a Holy Quran and a jar namaz that washed up on shore, so you're good to go there as well.
Mashallah.
But subhanallah, one day a waterproof DVD player, a waterproof portable DVD player washes up onto shore, and it's got 2 DVDs on there. What 2 DVDs do you want to have on this desert island to keep you to help you get through this horrid ordeal?
Did it come with the TV or just the DVD?
It's a portable. It's one of those portable DVD players. You open it, it's got a screen on it as well, and it's solar charged, so it will last forever.
I think I would want to watch Lost. I think is what it's called.
Lost. Yeah.
And
that's okay.
One is Arturo, because it's an amazing series and it goes on forever. Every episode is, I think, like an hour plus.
Keep you busy.
80 or 90 episodes in every season, so I'll be set for a while.
Nice.
And what season is it on? 5?
5 season. Yeah, I've seen all of them. So season 5 just finished.
Knowing Ali, he won't come back. He'll be like, just leave me out here. I'll be fine.
Hasnain, what about you?
For me, first DVD is Bear Grylls. Teach me how to survive. I'll be Superman, brown Superman. I'll be Brown Man, basically. And then number 2 would probably be Pursuit of Happiness, just to keep me sane and, let me know that alhamdulillah, everything will be all right.
Nice.
That's it.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who went through that same story but didn't have the happy ending that Will Smith had. So there is that kind of take into consideration. Me, I would have The Message because, if I'm going to be stranded on a desert island, I think I would like something Islamic to keep me going. I think if I had something like Iron Man or The Avengers, and I watched it over and over again, I'll drive myself crazy. So I definitely choose The Message to make sure I have that Islamic injection. And I guess I would also choose The Martian, Matt Damon, because it's about how his positivity got him through, being stranded alone on a planet all by himself. So I think the reason I wanted to ask you that question is because obviously we had a bit of banter over it, but movies, as we've been talking about together since the beginning, have such a profound impact on our lives. As we've been growing up, we find inspiration from various different films, and we connect to different films on different levels as we grow older. When you think back to your early teens, you think back to your younger years. Ali, you might have to think back, a few decades because of your old age. But when you think back, you relate certain experiences of your life to movies at the time. You know, you remember, for example, when you were 5 and you were watching a certain movie. You remember when you were 14 and you went to watch a certain film. Or, for example, you're going through something at a later age. You remember what you were watching at the time. You know, we connect to these things on such a deep level. And today on this episode, I want to discuss something that we touched on briefly in episode 1, which is about the relationship between Islam and Hollywood, and frankly asking the question, does Islam belong in Hollywood? Given the fact that, you know, we do have such a deep connection to film, but at the same time, you know, film, as much as we love it, we have to sometimes take a step back and ask ourselves, is it really correct to have such a deep relationship with something that isn't really born out of any sort of Islamic, you know, ideology? You know, it's not an Islamic idea. Filmmaking is not an Islamic concept in general. Hollywood is not something, you know, that's foundation is based in you know, Muslim experiences or Muslim ideas either. And you know, on just a very general level, you know, we know that Hollywood has a lot of nudity, has a lot of you know, propaganda in its films. So, you know, is that really a place where something as pure and beautiful as Islam should be in? And I wanted to start off on a very basic level. Both of you guys are actors, and you know, you both act in various productions. Hasnain, you do a lot of short films. You shared one recently on your Instagram. So let me ask you this: as an actor, how do you rectify being an actor with being a Muslim? Because I know acting in itself, you know, it's a very interesting profession because you are essentially pretending to be someone else a lot of the time, right? I know there are very very special skill sets required to do it. It's a very specific kind of art. But I have also heard, you know, that we can't really deny the fact that there's a relationship between acting and sex and nudity. So, you know, we know a lot of actors who speak about how, you know, when they tell their managers that they're not willing to do scenes of nudity or not willing to do scenes involving sex, you know, they're told that they won't be able to find work. You know, I know of cases where actors in acting school, one of the first kind of things they're taught is how to be comfortable unclothed in front of the camera. So, you know, we can't deny the fact that nudity and sex are such a big part of Hollywood and the film industry in general. So how do you rectify, you know, being a Muslim actor? Being an actor while being Muslim.
Right. So step one, being an actor is like any other art form, right? You have to find the balance or like the middle ground of it, right? So when I started acting 7-8 years ago, for me, it was just like, all right, you know, the first thing you learn in acting school is to play Romeo and Juliet, right? That's every standard acting class starts from that. Every typical dramatic acting class starts from Romeo and Juliet. You get the script, guys Romeo, females Juliet, right? And now you know that scene. It's very lovey, very dramatic, very, you know, balcony scene, this, that, and this. So for when I started out, like for me, I didn't know like right from wrong. I didn't know like, all right, how do I mix this art form with my spirituality, right? It was more about getting the role, getting the job, getting it done, right? That's kind of what you learn. But as I progress over time, you know, how do I rectify it? You start with some fundamentals such as, you know, what is the story about? What are we doing here? What's the story being told here, right? You start from the you know, the high level, you drill down into it, right? All right, from there, who like what character am I playing? Who is this character? What's his backstory? Because acting, there's nothing wrong with a Muslim acting. I don't feel like there's anything Islamically wrong with being an actor, right? Unless you hit those barriers of like, all right, now we're getting into stimulated sex scenes. Now we're getting into kissing scenes. Now we're getting into scenes that, you know, are like that. You stop hard there. But for me, you know, like the example I gave earlier is like, you know, if there's a film about an individual who's trying to relapse from being a druggie, and I play the role of the individual who is trying to go and better himself. You know, he's like an addict, right? For me, I'm telling a story. I'm acting out an individual's story. But for me, you know, the grounds are, all right, this is the character I have to play. Which scenes now are, you know, the kind of that barrier, like where do I go from there? So for me, you know, you figure out your morals, your you know, what your boundaries are, and then from there you kind of navigate through there. So for me, you know, I'll be honest, earlier on in my acting career, I did what I needed to do to secure that role. Let's just be honest, right? But over time, as I developed and as I changed and I started getting work, I had the power to kind of start saying no, because I relied on my acting abilities. I relied on my network. So when individuals came to me like, "Hey, I have this film, would love you to be a part of it." Great. What's the story about? Who's this character I'm playing? Well, let me see the scenes. Let me get a snippet of it. And I said no to a lot of films. So it comes down to basically what are your boundaries as a Muslim, right? Because as Muslims, we have some hardcore boundaries, but then we also have some personal boundaries. And I think that's kind of where you kind of bring both the art form bring both your art form of acting and your spirituality together, where you can make something beautiful and not, hit those, boundaries where like, all right, I can't do this. Or you can just say no and step away from it. So for me, that's kind of how I went about it. And that's kind of how I go about it today.
Do you feel that filmmaking as an industry is something that at its core is at polar opposites with the modesty that Islam preaches? Because the reason I ask you that is because, on a very obvious level, films have scenes of nudity and sex, and that kind of, differs depending on what you're watching. There are certain, shows on, for example, platforms like HBO, which unfortunately, even though, they're objectively good shows that you can learn from, have like untold amounts of scenes that are not just inappropriate, but borderline pornographic. And it's like, as a Muslim sitting down, you can't kind of watch those shows regardless of what you kind of want to take from it. Typically, I'm sure all of us do. You're watching a film or a TV show, a scene comes up that's inappropriate, you hit the fast forward button or kind of look away. That's what we're kind of accustomed to. But even on like a deeper level, let's say someone's casting a film, they're casting the actress, they're casting the actor, they're going to look for a good looking guy. They're going to look for Ali Alvi to be in the role. They're going to look for an attractive woman. So even on that kind of level, there's almost an element of immodesty there in its on a kind of deeper. It could be argued that that's a kind of immodest culture. So on that sense, do you feel like forget filmmaking as an art, because filmmaking can be used for anything, right? But the film industry in itself, as it exists today, do you believe it's at odds with Islam in terms of like modesty?
I'm going to speak from my experience in the indie circuit with short films, indie feature films. Yes and no. The reason why I say yes and no, yes, because when it comes to the heroine or the hero of the film, they want a hunk, they want the ideal good-looking candidate, right? But when it comes to supporting actors, like, the person who let's just take Mission Impossible for an example, right? Let's just say like the person who's going to help him hack into the system, the person who's playing the supporting roles, the person who's playing the day play, right? They just need somebody to what they call fillers, somebody who's a great actor, who knows what to do, plays the thing. Like when you look at somebody who's a hacker, they already have this image of what they want. So you go and look for that person. Yeah. When you think of somebody who's going to be playing a cop, unfortunately, they're going to look for somebody who's overweight, white, like that's what they're going to cast for. So in regards to modesty, I think when it comes to the individuals who's going to portray the film, who's like the star of the film, yeah, it comes down to, looks, this, that, and the other, right? I've been in that situation before where I wanted the role. I had all the credentials for the role. I, did an amazing job in the audition room, but unfortunately, I just didn't look the part, right? That's fine. I know what that means. I walk away from it, on to the next one. But I always apply for those the secondhand roles or like the supporting roles, because that's just as much part of the story to tell. So when it comes to modesty, I think it goes both ways. I think it goes both ways, in my opinion.
I mean, it's not even something that's very specific to Hollywood. Even if you look at, let's say, if you look at the kind of like Muslim film industry, for example, you look at certain Iranian films that tell stories of the prophets and of general Islamic history. Even they use pretty attractive actors to fill those roles in. So I think it is a culture and perhaps something to explore. Ali, you mentioned that you yourself, you said something really nice in the first episode, which is, if, for example, you want a role, but there's like a sort of sin involved in it, it's like you still have to answer to God at the end of the day, right? When you die, you have to answer to God. So I feel like for you, you have that kind of red line when it comes to certain things. So do you feel like that hinders you as an actor? Do you feel like, you don't have the same opportunities that other actors do? Because even like generally we look at the acting industry and like actors who are very, very well established in their fields. For example, even actresses, and I'm sorry, I want to focus on actresses specifically. I feel like actresses in Hollywood, so many of them, they start off their careers being sort of that eye candy, being sort of, being in kind of roles that are very immodest and, very inappropriate. And then as they kind of establish themselves in the industry, they eventually move on to more serious roles where they're cast more so for their acting than rather the way they look. So Ali, like, do you feel like, you can't really get a foothold in the film industry as an actor because you're so like, yes, no, because you have those red lines around where things hinder with your faith?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've experienced it a number of times. I was, as we're going through this, I thought about this one role that I was playing. It was actually on a John Cusack, I can't remember if it was a movie or a TV series or what it was, but I was actually on set, went for audition, everything worked out. I was on set. Yeah. And I don't know if they spoke with my agent or my agent didn't tell them or whatever, but they wanted me to shave my beard. And I was like, no, it's religious. I'm not shaving it. Yeah. And at that point, even though like I have full like hair, makeup done, ready to start shooting, they asked me to leave the set and they wanted to replace me because I wouldn't shave my beard.
Wow.
So, like, definitely, it makes a difference. So having those red lines, it does affect it. But then going back to what I said before, that I have to answer to God. So I'm gonna stay within my boundaries, and if I get something that, yes, great. If not, then so be it. So yeah.
I think what's crazy is that in any other industry, let's say for example, you walk into a job interview and they tell you, okay, we'll give you the job, you have to shave your beard, and you're like, well, I have to keep it on religious grounds. They're not, from what I understand, I don't know how it works in America, but here definitely they're not legally allowed to say, okay, we're going to discriminate against you based on your religion and not hire you, even though you can't kind of shave the beard. And I think, I guess when it comes to the film industry specifically, it kind of differs because they're looking not just for an actor in terms of what they can offer in terms of their acting skills, they're looking for the way that they look as well. The look is an important part of the role. So as Muslims who have a very, kind of deep relationship with film, I wonder, and I want to pose this question to you guys, both of you. Do you think sometimes as Muslims, we are being naive in trying to get into the film industry? Because I feel like, many people, when they try to get into industries that involve a lot of things that are antithetical to what they practice in their day-to-day lives, they kind of like lie to themselves. So, for example, I will discuss this more in detail in another episode, but for example, when it comes to music, I feel like Muslims who get into music, they kind of base the conversation around whether or not music is halal more based on the context of, I want to get into music, therefore let me find interpretations, Islamic interpretations about music that will help me get into music, And I feel like as, you guys are actors and getting into film industry, sometimes do you feel like there's an element of being naive in thinking that as a Muslim, you can really make it in an industry where, there is an abundance of, let's be frank, things that are absolutely against Islam, sin, drinking, alcohol, sex, nudity, drugs, parties, propaganda against Muslims as a whole as well. That as an industry just sounds like a really horrible industry.
Yeah.
And do you think we're being naive thinking that we can get into such an industry and work in such an industry? Or am I just being over the top and absolutely crazy?
I don't think...
I'll let Ali take this one. Sorry.
I don't think we're being naive. I think just like any industry, just like anything you want to break into, someone has to start and you have to take what you can get. And as you grow, you're able to start doing different things. So for example, you have what's called typecasting. So you'll get one person that will only get terrorist roles or will only get like mafia or, you know, a Mexican gangster or whatever, right? So those are the only roles they'll get to start with, but eventually we can take that and turn it into doing different roles once you have it established that you can get that type of role. It does seem kind of weird to see different actors in various roles when they're so typecast into a particular one. I was actually watching a movie a couple of days ago. I can't remember the name. It was on Amazon. Daniel Craig is in it. Oh, Knives Out. I don't know if you guys heard.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet. Don't ruin it for
me. I haven't seen it yet either.
So, all right, so I won't ruin it. So there's an actor who typically has a British accent. But in this movie, he shows up and he has a
Daniel Craig. You said it. You said Daniel Craig already, so we know who it is. You can tell us that. That's not a spoiler. He's on the poster.
Yeah. So he has a Southern accent, and it just took a second to adjust to that, saying, "Okay, wait, what? Who is this guy?"
Because you're so used to seeing him as James Bond having a British accent. Yeah.
Exactly. But after a little bit, you get accustomed to it, and it just goes on as usual. So I think what I'm trying to say is, yes, we should keep knocking on that door. Yes, we should break through it. And once we're in, we can start doing different roles, even if it means that we have to start off doing terrorist roles like I did.
That's funny. So he got typecasted for terrorist roles. Damn.
And then
I had it better than you.
But were you typecasted as terrorist? I know you did one, but were you like typecasted? Did you have a few more, or was it?
Yeah, so I've actually gotten the one that I was telling you about. It was actually completely different. It was in finance, so it was supposed to be a Wall Street movie or series. I can't remember. I think it was a movie. So it would have been in finance, and I was playing an Indian guy in that. So, but again, it came down to not having a beard. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna take it off. I was taken off.
Yeah. Hasnain, what do you think about the question that I posed? Do you think we're being naive in thinking that we can work in an industry that, you know, and again, like I'm asking this as a very objective question. I'm not saying flat out that the film industry is all those things. I just want to clarify that. I'm not saying that because, you know, I feel like, you know, we can look at things in different contexts and have that objective conversation. But, you know, do you think, you know, do you think Muslims are being naive in thinking that, you know, the film industry is anything but that?
No, I mean, I think we need more Muslim actors, filmmakers. I think they should enter the film industry and push the narrative. I think that, you know, we have a space in the film industry, 100%. And I'm seeing it the more I go to like film festivals, the more I go to the film circuit, the more I see what's coming out there. The narrative is being pushed. So I think that there's 100% a space for Muslim actors, filmmakers, writers, producers to come in and fill the void that the film industry is missing. And that's missing our stories, right? Because our stories narrative have been pushed by individuals who see it from one end and not the other end. Something interesting I pondered upon earlier today or yesterday was I was reading this article that a friend sent me. And that article, it was written by a female. That article brought up the film Argo. We all know that film, right? Infamous film, right? And she brought up the point. The point in that thing was the narrative was pushed by these individuals who went into Tehran to rescue these individuals, and the hostage takers were looked at so barbaric, right? And it was such a lopsided one point of view because the heroes always have a justification for their action, whether it's killing somebody, torturing somebody, whatever it is, it's justified. Like, oh, he did that for a reason because of this. Yeah. It was never justified in that film why the hostages were taken, why they were angry. That was never justified.
There was never any context given to their
exactly. We didn't see the other point of view why these individuals angry. We just thought they're just angry because they're just angry individuals. Well, that's not really the story, right? So 100%. There's a space for us. There's a massive space for us. We have to push the narrative, and we have to counterbalance basically what Hollywood is kind of pushing out with kind of our stories. And 100%, I think there is.
I think what's so interesting about moving on from that whole point of Hollywood and Modesty, I think what's so interesting about storytelling in general is the fact that the Holy Quran is mostly stories. Of course, true stories, but it's made up of stories. And I think that as Muslims, maybe I'm going on a whim here, but part of affection for storytelling. At least I can speak for myself that, you know, the reason I love watching films and watching stories is because I'm so entranced by stories and by good stories, by deep stories.
Right.
You know, the same way we were kind of brought up on these stories of Prophet Yunus, Prophet Moses, you know, Suleiman, and, you know, not just us, but, you know, Christians and Jews were all brought up on these stories that have served people for you know, thousands of years. And I think that what's so interesting is that the power of storytelling is that it kind of forces those lessons and ideas into your mind. So, for example, when you hear about the story of Ayub, it's one thing for God to tell you, for example, be patient. It's another thing to tell you Ayub lost this, and you were still patient. It's one thing to tell you, you know, keep the faith. But when it tells you the story of Prophet Yusuf and everything he went through, you know, you're kind of more that lesson is really drilled into your head, and it's a way to push forward ideas. So, you know, when it comes to filmmaking, for me, filmmaking is less about entertainment and more about the pushing of ideas. It's about having an idea and telling the idea. So, for example, Argo. Forget everything else. The reason I didn't think Argo was a good movie is because the idea it was giving to me was nothing really objective or interesting. It was just a standard, okay, these guys were in trouble, American heroes came in to save the day, they're the good guys. That's not an interesting idea. You know, you think about a film like The Godfather, for example, a film that everyone knows and loves. You know, for me, the idea it's pushing forward is not about mafia. It's not about people killing each other. It's about America's immigrant story. It's about you know, coming to America as an immigrant and not being able to make it on your own 2 feet. So, for example, the only way you can kind of rise to any sort of power is through these kind of, you know, mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
You know, think about all of these films and the kind of like the ideas that they're pushing, and it's very interesting because I had this conversation with a sheikh about this podcast before we started it. I kind of like ran the idea by him just to kind of get his thoughts and, you know, and feedback on what this podcast should kind of like be. And he said something very interesting. He said, you have to ask yourself, in Islam, we have what is the foundation and we have what is kind of like the secondary branch of that foundation. So, for example, if the foundation itself is problematic, it means that the extension of that is also problematic. So, for example, a bar is problematic because alcohol is problematic, right? So you have that. So you judge things based on that. And he asked me, he goes, do you think film as an essence in itself is problematic? Given that, for example, it has, you know, Islamophobia, you know, it has sex, it has nudity, it has violence. And I was like, well, it's interesting because when I think about film, I don't think about film from those angles. When I think about film as a foundation, I think about inspiration. I think about storytelling. I think about the expression of the human soul. You know, I mentioned to you before how filmmaking, in many ways, is like poetry in that it's an expression of emotion. You know, it's a way for us to yes, tell our stories, but also express ourselves through visuals. And there was a really a beautiful podcast that I completely missed, but the title of it was about how, you know, filmmaking and the way Muslims should interpret filmmaking is looking at filmmaking as a form of creating light. The same way, you know, Allah creates light, His servants can also create light, you know, in kind of like, you know, in glorification of Allah. You know, the Shaykh also told me that in the Quran, you know, Allah says that وَعَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ, we've taught man how to express himself. And in that sense, you know, filmmaking is a form of expression. So, you know, having that in mind, Hasnain, as a filmmaker, as someone who creates films all the time, how much of that filmmaking experience is your spirituality? Walk me through that kind of like, walk me through your process and what role spirituality plays in it. You know, do you get up in the morning and say, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, this is an act of ibadah, I'm going to make this film? Or is it more like, you know, this is just my job and you know, Islam is a part of it, but it's not really, you know, walk me through that process.
Yeah, so really good question. Spirituality plays a big role in my filmmaking process. Really big role, because it's kind of where my story starts, if that makes sense, right? I'll give you a prime example. I recently finished reading a book, Journey to the Unseen World. You probably read it or you probably heard about it. It's a phenomenal book. It's scary, but it's a phenomenal book.
Is it the one with the 5 stages of death, or was that?
Yeah, it's really phenomenal book. It's 15 chapters. It's a very short film and it's free online on PDF. I do recommend the audience to read it. So I recently finished that book, right? And it talks, and then the beginning of that book starts off where the individual, because it's from the writer's perspective, and he himself is in his own grave looking at his own body. As somebody who's a filmmaker, how amazing is that scene to start off with, right? Because then the audience will be like, wait, time out. What's this film about? Now, because I read that book, that's where the light bulb goes off. All right, can I make this book into a web series? How interesting would that be? You know, that's kind of where my ideas as a filmmaker, and let me just make this clear, I'm an actor above a writer and a producer, right? I started writing because I was put in a position where there was nothing out there for me that interested me, so I started writing and then producing it. So yeah, spirituality plays a huge role, not just from acting, but from the storytelling process too, because you know, the Quran, you brought up a really good example. It's a book full of stories. You know, I think they say that every Meccan chapter is a story, whereas every Medinian chapter is basically like a lesson, right? Yeah, right. So I just finished reading the chapter called "The Ant" on numbers, right? And it talks about Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, right? And I pondered on that. And you know me, I always post on my Instagram like selections of surahs that I finished reading. Yeah. And the Quran is 100% a place where I develop stories and get that juices flowing, because that's kind of that's my identity. That's where I'm from. Yeah. And it trickles down from that. So yeah, 100%. That's kind of where it's a huge process of my filmmaking. It's a huge process of what I do. And that's kind of where I get a lot of this, my motivation from.
What's so interesting about that point, Hasnain, is that when you look at various Hollywood films, some of them are just straight up translations of biblical stories. Like, for example, You look at The Lion King. I've seen articles written about it, about how it is essentially just, a translation of the story of Jesus Christ and the story of the resurrection. And, when you look at biblical stories in general, they kind of offer the foundations of what are many of the stories and films that we hear today. Stories of rising up in the face of adversity, stories of going through extreme trials, but coming out the other end of it as a better person. These are very biblical / Quranic themes that we see in every single film that we watch. And I think when we speak about the relationship between Islam and Hollywood, on a very basic level, I feel like there's two kinds of people that watch movies. And I was actually reading an article about this as well. There's one kind of view of movies that takes films at a very surface level. So, for example, character does A, character does B, ends with C. That was very entertaining. I'm done. I'm going to go and rest my day. Then there's another kind of viewer, someone who consumes films and looks at films from the perspective of, okay, what does this story mean? What is the story? What kind of idea is the story trying to portray? What are the visuals telling me? There's a kind of viewer that kind of interprets films on a very deeper, more philosophical level. And I think, personally, I kind of fall into that category, because whenever I walk away from a very powerful film, the first thing I'm thinking is, wow, that character, for example, what does that teach me about my own faith? There's been plenty of times where I've walked away from a film thinking about, what kind of impact that has on me. One of my favorite films, The Thin Red Line, I don't know if you guys have seen it. Very slow, very poetic film, a World War II film, but it's all about, the engagement between the battlefield and what effect that has on a man's soul, what effect that has on the being, on a human being on deeper levels. Films like, I mentioned The Godfather, looking at The Godfather more than just a gangster epic, but thinking about how it's really the tale of an immigrant story. Also looking at, films by Spielberg and Christopher Nolan, like, for example, Interstellar, just watching that film. I don't know how you guys, when you saw that in cinema, but seeing, them going from planet to planet, seeing all these amazing environments and thinking about, God's majesty and his creation, what he's created in the universe. At the same time, he's got this relationship with his daughter at home. And, it also it kind of makes you reflect on the kind of intimate relationships you have in your life and how you treat, people that you love, and, what you would do for people that you love. So there's so many different, deeper elements of film that we can, really extract as Muslims. So when we ask the question, does Islam belong in Hollywood? For me, I feel like Islam belongs everywhere. The same way God belongs everywhere. God is not limited to one place. God is everywhere. At the same time, I feel like as Muslims, we should be able to put ourselves in any situation and understand how to act as Muslims in that situation, how to interpret that situation as Muslims. So for me personally, the way I interpret, God's given me a love of film. The way I interpret that love of film is by taking the spirituality that I kind of find myself in film, bringing it out and bringing it into myself and kind of reflecting on that.
I think that's coming from your lens, though, right? That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it.
Exactly. I mentioned how film is, the expression of the human soul. Yes, the majority of filmmakers are not Muslim, but at the same time, they're still souls and they're still expressing something, right? And as a human soul myself, I'm taking those expressions into me and kind of like, interpreting them in my own ways. And I think that's the beauty of film. I think that deserves a whole other podcast episode in itself. Hopefully we can kind of pick apart films and look at what kind of lessons we can kind of pick out of them as Muslims. And, like I said before, this podcast in itself is about how we as Muslims interpret these things, how we interpret art, how we interpret film, TV, and different elements of the arts. I wanted to kind of end with advice for Muslim actors and filmmakers who are kind of wanting to get into the industry and wanting to, wanting to kind of perfect their processes. You guys are both actors. You guys both go to auditions. Ali, tell me, what's your process? Like in terms of like the most literal explanation of it, how do you get an audition? And then, as a Muslim, do you look for anything specific? Walk me through your process, and what kind of advice you would give for someone that's going through the same, that is looking for a process to get themselves into the acting industry.
Well, early on, I would actually just...
No, I'm just saying because Ali's advice might lead to individuals getting terrorist roles the whole time. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But Ali, you know what? Bless us with your knowledge. Give us some advice. Give me some advice. Come on. Give me some advice.
By the way, sorry guys, if you see us laughing randomly, it's just because we're so comfortable with each other that we know what we're going to say before we say it. Sorry, I can't.
So, I guess in the beginning, when you guys were still in cradles,
I wasn't born.
You weren't born. What I was doing was I was actually looking for really anything that would get my foot in the door, so I can get in, see what it's like, go in, do an audition, hopefully get a role. But then as time went on, I started to realize that some of the roles that I was going for aren't necessarily the ones I could be doing. And then at that point, I started questioning, what's the whole role? What's the character about? Is it a short role, or is it going to be throughout the movie or throughout the series? And in doing so, I started learning the different aspects of that character. And then I realized, okay, maybe I can't play that part. So I started to exclude myself from those. Or I would still go and then tell them, hey, listen, maybe we can, what if I don't do that part of that role? But now, years later, what's come down to for me is I've given an outline to my agents. I told them, these are my outlines. This is what I can do, and this is what I will not do. So anytime you have role within this guideline, then let me know. I'll go to the audition. Otherwise, don't waste my time. I'll continue doing whatever else I'm doing.
Do you still go to auditions like currently, or?
Right now for the last.
I mean, not right now, but I mean, like in the past few years.
Yeah. So if I get something within that guideline, I do still go to those roles, to those auditions. I get some things, other things I don't get.
What are your guidelines like?
Let me rephrase that. Not so much for the acting side, but more so for the modeling side. Okay. The guidelines, obviously, the Islamic guidelines. Really, nothing too far outside of that. Nothing that requires me to shave my beard, nothing that requires basically any sort of sin, or even on like the gray areas I try to stay away from. But that's me personally. And everyone's on a different journey. Everyone's in a different place in life, different place in their spirituality. But for me personally, I would rather stay away from those.
Yeah. That's actually really good to have a guideline. That's actually really good advice. I don't have one. I don't have a
Don't you guys talk every single day, and he hasn't told you about his process yet?
No, see, the thing with me and Ali is we don't talk about artistic stuff. We talk about what we're going to eat, where we're going to eat, where we're going to meet up to eat. Every time I'm talking to Ali, it's like, where we're eating. Yo, I want a burger. Yo, I want wings. Yo, I want...
Since we made the 786 Boulevard WhatsApp group, that's all I hear you guys saying. Where are we meeting? What's happening? Hasnain, what are you doing at 8? What are you doing at 9?
That's all we do. We just eat.
Yeah, we do. A lot.
Well, you need energy to obviously keep yourselves going when it comes to acting, so it's a good thing. Hasnain, tell me about your process. Just to end things off. People who are thinking about getting into acting, walk us through your process so that they can learn from it.
So for me, I'm gonna give more fundamentals because my process is more for designed for me. But my fundamentals are if you are an individual, not even just Muslim, I'm just gonna give general ones. But if you are Muslim, first things first is getting a headshot. I think getting a headshot will define who you are as an actor, right? Because if you are a Muslim male and you have a beard, if they see your beard in the headshot, that's putting you on that boundary list already. That's putting you on that stepping stone. Like, all right, this guy has a beard. So when the directors and the producers and the casting agents see you and they see your headshot with the beard, they already have that image of you. Like, all right, cool, he has a beard. Same thing with like if you're a female, you wear the hijab, right? You want to get a headshot with the hijab because you're setting that precedent of this is who I am. Your headshot is basically your resume. It's basically how they see you. Ali would probably agree with me that the headshot is basically how you get that invitation to an audition.
As someone who's really like unaware of this kind of process, when it comes to headshots, it's literally just a snapshot of you, right? It's nothing like you can't play around with it. You can't like be very unique with it, or
no, you can have a comedic headshot, you can have a dramatic headshot, you can have a character headshot, you can have a serious headshot. Because the thing is, if you're going to apply for a film, and Ali jump in, feel free to jump in. If you're applying for a film that's a comedic film, you want more of a playful headshot to submit it because it goes with the tone of the film.
You want like
it's like
resume,
right? So if you're applying for a sales job, you don't want to put in a ton of IT experience. You want to put in sales experience.
Yeah.
Just like that, if you're applying for a comedic role, like you mentioned, then you want to have, a comedic.
Something playful, yeah.
Something playful. Yeah. But if you want a serious role, then you grow out your beard this long.
And just to continue off of that, go ahead. Ali, what did you say?
I said that would give you a different type of role.
Yeah, it would. That's the advice I was trying to get out of Ali. That's the beard role, but. So headshots are very important. That's kind of where you want to start off. Make sure you do research into a photographer, right? From there, you can split off. Like for me, building your resume, you got to start small. You got to start with student films. You got to start doing films that you probably going to question, like, wait, is this even for me? What is this going on? You got to start somewhere, right? You can't just jump into a feature film and do not. But for me, taking some acting classes to teach you technique of like memorizing lines and this, that, and I think that's vital. I mean, there's a bunch of acting classes. I mean, I live in New York, so and you live in the UK. Obviously, there's an abundance of acting classes. You definitely want to teach yourself the skill set because once you get the headshot, you know who you are. Once you get the training of it, you can kind of start paving and navigating yourself in the film industry. You can start going to these websites like Backstage, Actors Access, where they post these films, and you can kind of see the type of positions that they're posting. For me, what I do is I'm in the position in my life where I apply to every single lead male role, whether they're looking for an African American, whether they're looking for a Caucasian, whether they're looking for Asian, whether they're looking for somebody who's bulky, not bulky, tattoos, not tattoos. I apply for everything because one big lesson I learned, and my acting coach has taught me this, and it's true, writers, directors, and producers themselves don't know what they want at the end of the day. They're looking for something that sparks them, and that's what they want. And you have the opportunity to go into that audition, if you get called in, to make that spark happen. Me, myself, when 2017, 2018 when I started doing my own work, writing and producing and then acting in my own work. I can attest to that. When I bring in people from auditions, I don't know what I'm looking for. Just because I have the female written as a white girl, doesn't mean I'm gonna automatically, cast a white girl. It can be somebody who's a Hispanic background and she nailed it and she's perfect and like, wow, that's amazing. I want her. you have that strength, and that comes from a perfect headshot, good training, and confidence in yourself that, listen, I can change these individuals' perspective on this character because I know that I got it in me. And you need that headshot, resume, and the confidence to go. And then from there, the sky's the limit. You can end up anywhere. You can be in a Leonardo DiCaprio film, which is my goal. My goal is to win an Oscar in 10 years, 10-year frame. That's my goal. But inshallah. But I think that's the fundamental. That's where you start.
Yeah, and I also think that what we're giving advice on right now is more so the professional films where you're actually going to get paid. But don't jump necessarily right into that. Look for student films. Look for different projects that are going on, whether it's a university or a production that someone's doing, or one of the schools, the acting schools that they're doing a production. You don't get paid, but you get a lot of experience. And then you also start building a network of people that you need to know, directors,
Absolutely.
right, and so forth. So that's one. And then also when you do go for auditions for professional films, in the beginning, go for as many as you can. Even if, like Hasnain said, you don't fit the role, because either they'll see something and it'll spark something in you or in them from you, or you'll start making connections in the industry. So now, let's say I meet Hasnain somewhere on an audition. We exchange information. 6 months down the road, he has some information about a role, but it never got to you, and he ends up sending it your way, and then you can hopefully get something that way as well. So networking is very important also.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say 50% of the roles that I've booked were through networks. It was through people that saw my film, saw my reel, my acting reel, saw my resume, and they just hired me on the spot. But yeah, I mean, this podcast, as Nouri can mention as well, it's you know, it's about art, but it's also about network. Like we're also trying to build a network here.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're a writer, producer, actor yourself, and you see that this podcast is fruitful to you, you know, leave us a comment, send us a message, let us know what you're working on.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think like, when we first initiated this podcast together, like I think it was pretty clear between all of us that we're here to have conversations. You know, we're here to sit down with people that have inspiring relationships with art that they can explore with us, you know. And I think that's what's so wonderful about sorry, Hasnain, are you hot?
No, I turned the light on because we've been on this podcast for so long, it got dark out.
Oh no, because you know I thought you put the fan on because there's like a wait.
Oh, my fan's always on.
Wait, is it darker in Queens than it is in Manhattan? Because
we're only 15 minutes away from each other, Stan. How is it dark outside?
It's dark. There's a cloud outside. It's about to pour.
Oh, wow.
It's about to pour.
I think
Anyways,
that's a good place to end it. We're quite tired and exhausted, but you know, it has been a great conversation. You know, I feel like exploring the relationship between our spirituality and film is something that I always love doing. You know, because it's something that I do in my head every single day when I'm sitting down and watching a film, and finding some guys that I can chat to about it is absolutely wonderful. So Ali, Hasnain, thank you so much. Inshallah, we'll be back again together soon. We have plenty of episodes lined up and plenty of interesting guests lined up. So I'll see you guys then, inshallah.
All right. See you guys.
Salam.